I want to ask you a question that I'm personally fascinated by, unrelated to everything we've discussed, and probably one you're not expecting. You played a key role 2 years ago during the Wagner mutiny. You were having discussions with Prigozhin, with President Putin, ending the advancement towards Moscow. I remember covering the story very closely for 24 hours live. It's a very scary day for the world, in my opinion, but it's one not talked about. It's been 2 years. What can you tell us about that day? Again, that's a personal question that I'm really fascinated by. What can you tell us? What were those discussions like? Why did Prigozhin stop his advancement? What was the agreement? Is there anything additional you can share from 2 years ago?
Вы
You know,
знаете,
this is a big
это
question.
большой вопрос на
In
самом
fact,
деле. А,
my actions
Мои
were
действия
appreciated
были
by the West,
оценены Западом, в том числе, что меня удивило.
surprisingly, even by the
Даже
CIA
ЦРУ
and
и
MI-16, along with
МИ-6
other
и
intelligence
другими
agencies. They
спецслужбами,
appreciated
они
it
это очень
greatly.
высоко
Why?
оценили.
It
Почему?
is not customary
Об
to talk
этом
about this publicly.
не принято публично говорить.
However, the
Но
West took notice.
Запад это заметил.
I felt
Я
that too at the
тогда
time.
тоже это почувствовал,
As the
но
process unfolded,
в этом процессе, когда уже процесс
I
начался,
sensed it as
я это
well.
тоже почувствовал.
At that
Так
time,
что
Zhenya Prigozhin was rushing toward the
Женя
nuclear button,
Пригожин рвался к ядерной кнопке.
and the West
И
assumed
западники
that he could
допускали,
potentially overthrow
что в тот период он может
the existing government
свергнуть
at that time
существующую власть
and
и
seize nuclear weapons.
захватить ядерное оружие.
This
Вот
is
за
what they
это
privately
вы
thanked
меня
me for.
не публично благодарили.
I came to
Я
this
это
realization in
понял
the middle
в
of the day,
середине
not
дня, не
immediately.
сразу.
I
Я
never
даже не
imagined
думал,
that
что
Zhenya
такое
Prigozhin could
безумство
descend into such
Женя
madness.
Пригожин может
I had
дойти.
known
Я
him
его
well for a
знал
long time,
неплохо, давно знал.
and we had
У нас
maintained a
были
good
с ним
relationship.
добрые отношения.
But
Но
to
чтобы
reach this
до
point,
этого
it stems
дойти,
from his
это его
inexperience.
неопытность.
He
Он
should have
должен
understood
был
that it wasn't
понимать,
just about
что его просто не только в России,
Russia.
Россия,
The
россияне,
Russians, as well
но
as the
и
Americans and the
те же
British, would destroy
американцы,
him.
англичане
They would not
уничтожат.
allow him to
Они
gain
не
access to
дадут
nuclear
ему
weapons.
прорваться к ядерному оружию.
This is a
Но это
fact.
так.
But he
Но
didn't
он этого
grasp
не
that.
понимал.
He
Он,
went straight to
как
Moscow.
у нас говорят, пер напрямую, шел напрямую в Москву.
We had a
Мы с
talk with
Путиным
Putin.
переговорили.
When he left
Когда он
Rostov, we
вышел из
talked.
Ростова, мы с ним переговорили.
I
Я
won't go
там
into details
детали не
there.
буду,
That's a
это
separate,
отдельный
extensive
большой
discussion.
разговор.
I realized that the
Я
situation was
понял,
serious.
что ситуация серьезная. И я
Initially, I
ему не
didn't disclose
сразу
my actions
сказал
to
о
him right
своих
away.
действиях.
I asked him,
Я его
"Let me
попросил,
think it over and I'll call you
дай,
back."
я подумаю и тебе позвоню,
I
скажу,
needed to
что
assess what
мы
we could
можем
do.
сделать. И когда
Once I gathered all the
я собрал
necessary
всю
information,
информацию,
I concluded that
я
I had to
решил, что я
intervene.
должен вмешаться.
If Zhenya
И
Prigozhin would not agree,
если Женя Пригожин не согласится
with
с
my
моей точкой
perspective during the
зрения
negotiations,
в переговорах, а мы
and
на
we were in
связи были,
contact, I would have been compelled to
я
mobilize my
вынужден
most
был, я
combat-ready units
вынужден буду поднять свои боеспособные, самые
and send them to defend
боеспособные
Moscow.
части и направить на защиту Москвы.
I called
Я
Putin
позвонил
and
Путину,
confirmed that I would
сказал,
be
да,
prepared.
я буду присылай
Send
самолеты,
planes. We would transfer our
будем
special forces
перебрасывать
and special
наши
operations forces to
спецподразделения,
Moscow to protect
силы
the city.
специальных операций, будем перебрасывать под Москву для того, чтобы защитить Москву.
I realized in the
Я
middle
в
of the day
середине дня
that this situation
понял,
was
что
very
это очень
serious.
серьезно. И я в
And I called
очередной раз уже
Prigozhin again.
позвонил
Our
Пригожину.
conversation has recently been published, but it
Недавно
is twisted.
опубликовали наш разговор, исказив его.
Artificial
Искусственный
intelligence
интеллект
does work
все-таки
after
работает.
all. My opponents
Мои
in the West published the
противники на
conversation,
Западе
twisted it,
опубликовали
and
разговор,
added their own
исказив его,
interpretations.
добавив там свои акценты.
But
Но, по
essentially,
сути,
we had a conversation,
разговор такой
and I
был,
managed to convince
и мне
Prigozhin
удалось убедить Пригожина,
that he would not achieve his
что
goals.
он не добьется своих целей.
I
И
told
я
him,
ему сказал о том,
Zhenya,
что
we
Женя,
have solid relations,
у нас
but
с
you
тобой
need to
добрые были
understand
отношения, но ты понимаешь, здесь
These are high-level interstate relations. Please don't take offense, but I am transferring my Special Forces units to defend Moscow. I communicated this to him. I asked him to think it over and provide me with a response. I will do everything possible to ensure that you are not subject to criminal prosecution. I will ask Putin to close the criminal case. At the time, Putin announced that a criminal case would be opened against the rebels. Well, there were other promises as well, and I will take you to Belarus and station you in Belarus. After some time, we had another phone call, he agreed, and they were already passing near Belarus, naturally heading towards Moscow. And then they turned around and went to Belarus. I stationed more than 1,000 of them, maybe about 2,000 people. I stationed them in Belarus. Well, that's just basically it. And there were a lot of details there. This is how this conflict ended.